This video provides a brief introduction to System 1 and System 2 thinking. This is a very handy framework for the risk sciences, so you'll hear me refer to it off and on throughout the program. At its core, risk management, when it's well done, is trying to minimize the role of System 1 thinking in decision making, especially decision making under uncertainty. Those of you pursuing the Master of Science degree will be exposed to this once again in much more detail in Risk 605, a course on decision making under uncertainty. The System 1 and System 2 framework are developed fantastically in a great book by Daniel Kahneman. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow. This book provides tremendous insights into how we think. Let's do a quick systems check. The topic is toilet paper, and the question is, do the sheets go on top or do the sheets go underneath? And that's a question that everybody can answer, and they answer it automatically. Let's go on to question 2. A paper mask and a cloth mask cost $1.50. The cloth mask costs $1 more than the paper mask. How much does the paper mask cost? System 1 answered the toilet paper question. And System 1 is saying, I got this for the second question as well. And more than likely, it said it cost $1. But System 1 is wrong, because if the cloth mask cost $1, the paper mask cost 50 cents, and that's not a $1 difference. So we have to engage System 2 to answer this question. So let's take $1 away from that $1.50. We got 50 cents remaining. If we split that in half, then the paper mask cost $0.25. Add the $1 back in for the cloth mask, and the cloth mask cost $1.25, and we've met that criterion of it costing $1 more. System 1 is great for some decision making, not so much for questions that require a little bit of analytical or critical thinking. In risk science, what we're trying to do is to activate System 2 decision making. Let's talk about some individual decision making. System 1 is intuitive. It's involuntary. It decides things very quickly, but it uses heuristics, shortcuts, to do that. It works on an automatic basis, and it's very impulsive. It says, I've got this. It's pretty efficient, and it makes us experts very often. It's especially good for repetitive, routine, or inconsequential and easily reversed kinds of decisions. System 2, by comparison, is very slow and deliberate. It takes effort. This is what we use for analytical decision making. And it does take more time, and it does take more effort. But the time and the effort make us right. This is the system that applies logic, it considers evidence, it analyzes evidence. And so here is a takeaway. System 1 is no good for decision making under uncertainty, and a lot of the decision making in risk science is decision making under uncertainty. System 2 is required for decision making under uncertainty. Remember our mask question? When we make decisions using System 1 is very aggressive. It says, I got this. I can handle this decision. So unless you check it, System 1 is going to make decisions for you, and it's not always going to do it very well. System 1 takes shortcuts to fill in the uncertainty. It uses biases and heuristics. Motivational bias, representativeness, availability, anchoring, and adjustment. There are tons and tons of biases and heuristics. I would like you to be aware of the fact that they exist. We're not going to delve into them in any detail at this point in the course, but I want you to be aware of the role they play, not only in your individual decisions, but in the decisions that the organizations that you work for make. Think of heuristics as rules of thumb that are buried in our subconscious. They're shortcuts that the mind grabs and uses, and they result in quick and practical solutions. For example, if I ask you, How far is it from Sacramento, California to Dry Fork, West Virginia? Most of us are likely to go silent for a second and wait for System 1 to provide us with a number. So a number pops into our heads. What number pops into your head? I'm going to say 2,500 is a number that pops into my head. But you know that's not going to be right. But that's an anchor. Our minds go to anchors. They invent a fact, they invent a guess, and we treat that as if it's a fact. So I'm now going to add 200 miles to it and subtract 200 miles from it and say it's between 2,300 and 2,700 miles. Although guidance is not a heuristic, it can function as one. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, for example, has 275 engineering regulations that tell people how to do a variety of tasks. Guidance, policy, standard operating procedures, these all provide a shorthand way of making decisions at times. Once things are written down in guidance, if you follow the guidance, the presumption is whatever happens must be okay because you followed the guidance. But we find more and more often that's not the case. The food industry follows the food code, but we still have 3,000 people a year die because of something they ate. And structures sometimes fail despite having followed all the guidance in constructing them. Cognitive biases are another favorite go-to for System 1. These differ from the rules of thumb and shortcuts of heuristics. These are the mind's faulty interpretation of accurate information. Cognitive biases are different from computational errors and other kinds of errors. Those mistakes can be caught and corrected. Cognitive biases are hardwired in the brain, and that makes them very difficult to change and impervious to correction. Facts don't necessarily change cognitive biases. People are more likely to double down and go with their beliefs. This slide shows a mix of biases and heuristics. Don't bother trying to read it here on the slide, but I want to make you aware that this is a poster that you'll find in the required readings for Module 2. So I suggest that you blow it up, take a look at it, read it, look it over, and think about how often you see people making decisions using these particular techniques. They come up a lot more often than you might expect. For now, I'll be happy if you understand that our minds, when they rely on System 1, grab things like this from the toolkit, from our subconscious toolkit, and use them in place of evidence, facts, and good science. And that's what the risk sciences are trying to minimize. These are some more tools that are relied on by System 1. This is another collection of logical fallacies that list a number of heuristics and cognitive biases that we use for decision making in place of good risk management technique. This is also available as a poster in Mod 2's required readings, so make sure you give it a little bit of time and look this over. The School of Thought makes these 3 posters available. This is the third one that is not so much about System 1. This might actually be a good list of tools to use to start your System 2 thinking. But I do want to point out that I was incorrectly saying you'll find these in the required readings. These posters are listed and found under the required videos. So here's your takeaway as we begin our program together. In risk management, we want more science, more evidence, more analytical thinking, less System 1. So risk science is all about engaging System 2 in our decision-making processes.